So good afternoon, participants. Now we have Dr. R. Ramasesan with us from IGCAR Kalpakkam. We have Dr. Yuvaraj, Assistant Professor SRM IST, with us to chair the session. And I request Dr. Yuvaraj to introduce the speaker and take over.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So I'm happy to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Ramasesan Rajagopalan from IGCAR Kalpakkam. And so actually I will introduce, short introduction about him. Dr. Ramasesan Rajagopalan is a well-known scientist working as assistant professor and scientific officer in Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Kalpakkam. And he worked as a visiting researcher at ISIR, Osaka University from 2002 to 2005. And he has completed his PhD in material science from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras in the year 1998. After completing his ME in material science from Regional Engineering College, now it's called NIT Trichy. And he has published nearly 100 articles with Hutch index of 16 and ITAN index of 23 and citation around 760. His area of research includes intermetallics, thin films, and energy storage, materials, and etc. So it's actually it's honor to be with him. And sir, actually stage is yours, so you can start your discussion.
Yes. Good afternoon. Just a minute. Let me share this screen. I hope all can see these slides.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all. I thank this SRM University to give me an opportunity to discuss about the recent studies we had in our IGCAR Material Science group. Before going to the subject, we are a small group of around 120 scientists are working in this organization. Particularly, it's called Material Science. And we have around 20 PhD students working with us. So basically, we study nano materials and condensed matter physics, and then irradiation, all these kind of fundamental studies we used to do in our group. Probably you might have heard about from Dr. Kamuruddin 2 days back. So I'm also working with him. Okay. Sorry. I don't know what happened. Yes. Today's discussion will be like I'm going to give some introduction about aluminum nitride and then its applications. Then I'll go to that synthesis of aluminum nitride. There's a mistake. The two is by mistake it came, and there are two different orientations are there. Particularly how to grow A-axis oriented aluminum nitride thin films. I will explain. Then two different doping elements, which are all very useful for the wide band gap application. That is basically it's a dilute magnetic semiconductors. I'll just touch upon that. Finally, I'll show the multi-layer thin films of TAL and TAN, because how the multi-layers can be grown. And then it's a recap of the discussion. This is what we are going to do. In the afternoon, after having food, this will be very tough to continue for more than one hour talk. So just I wanted to touch upon some points so that you can grasp some interesting things. I don't want to express anything about the theory or anything. So how to grow a thin film, that's all we are going to discuss today. See here, you can see that this aluminum nitride is a hexagonal compound, which is having two different kinds of bonds. One is B1 and B2. B1 basically at the basal planes, and B2 predominantly at the C-axis side. The B1 is a covalent nature and B2 is ionic in nature. and B1, the covalent nature bond is very strong. So that means the basal plane is very strong. And interestingly, this hexagonal structure of aluminum nitride is not the only structure for aluminum nitride. Cubic also coexist, but cubic is a metastable phase. When you go below 6 or 7 nanometers, then only the cubic structure can be stabilized. Or otherwise, if you go beyond above 6 nanometers, this stable structure, the hexagonal forms. And the hexagonal structure is called as a Wurtzite structure, and the C by A ratio is smaller than the theoretical 1.633. So, and one more interesting thing I just wanted to mention here, this has a center of non-center of symmetry. That means in the crystallography, a point group which contains an inversion center, you can see that this is benzene ring, inversion center as one of its symmetry elements, then it is called centrosymmetric. Otherwise, it's whichever point groups lacks this center of symmetry is called non-centrosymmetric compounds. Those are all called polar groups or chiral or whatever it is. Sometimes both will not be there. But if it is a centrosymmetric, as I told you that the previous condition prevails. So what is the benefit if you ask? If it is a non-centrosymmetric, basically it is anisotropic material within a single crystal. So this can hold charges. That is one we are going to discuss in the later stages of this presentation. And this once the basal plane is very strong, I told you, the hardness will be very high compared to this C-axis orientation. That's what already published journal, journal published are existing. From that we can understand. Well, the important point here is this aluminum nitride can emit a wavelength of 210 nanometers. That is, UV or below UV, deep UV kind of rays can be emitted. This is a very interesting system by which you can, for example, you can use this light for nanofabrication, particularly sterilization. You can kill the bacteria and water purification, and the high intense light can be used for the high density optical data recording, which is, it's a old technology. DVD and these Blu-ray DVDs can be covered with a protective layer of around 98 nanometers, roughly. Those kind of layers can be cured with the help of this UV LED lights. And this can, as I already heard from Professor Yuvraj, that surface acoustic emission can be possible in the case of aluminum nitrides. And if you grow one single oriented direction, then it is possible, either C-axis or A-axis, it is possible. And in the medicine also, this is a piezoelectric material. So this can be used as a very good ultrasonic sensors. And particularly the lighting, gallium nitride is a very good LED material, which can be alloyed with either aluminum or indium. This alloys has a very good LEDs, but you cannot grow it on a silicon substrate, which I will show you in the few slides. That it is very difficult to grow LED material, that gallium nitride, over any silicon substrate, because the lattice mismatch problem is there. But when you grow it on aluminum nitride, particularly the A-axis orientation, the growth can be possible because they match the lattices. That is very important information. If anybody wants to read further, I have given here the paper journal publication, the Nature. In the year 2006, there is a very elaborate data is given on the account of aluminum nitride used as a industrial material. Okay. Well, I just wanted to compare this gallium nitride and aluminum nitride. Already I told gallium nitride is a LED material, and this is near UV 365 nanometers, and you can get different colors by doping with indium or aluminum and so on. But the emission intensity of emission, when you compare gallium nitride with aluminum nitride, one more thing I missed here, it's a 210 nanometers, a DPUV, you can, the light emission is different. The interesting thing is, since this aluminum nitride is anisotropic in nature, when you compare with gallium nitride, the CO plane emission is much smaller than the A plane. That A plane has 25 times high intensity can be emitted compared to the C-axis aluminum nitride. So this is the very important difference between the gallium nitride and the aluminum nitride. And already I told that aluminum nitride, the C-A plane is comparable with the gallium nitride C-A plane. So this can be a good substrate in the case of growth. And particularly I told that aluminum nitride in cubic phase is very harder. If time permits, I will show you a few slides on how the aluminum nitride improves the hardness, because indirectly only we can find out. Already I told you aluminum nitride is a metastable phase material. So growing directly in a system, it's a little difficult. I'm saying cubic aluminum nitride, not the hexagonal aluminum nitride. Well, the important point comes here. That is, if you wanted to grow aluminum nitride, as such, it's absolutely not a problem. Either you will get amorphous or in the form of crystalline. But when you wanted to have a magnetic property in the system, that is, dilute magnetic semiconductors are the semiconductors with magnetic property, particularly the spins of the electrons very well used to store the data. That is called a dilute magnetic semiconductor in general. Particularly this aluminum nitride is, it's not a new material particularly. When you dope with transition elements that you can see from the periodic table of this, these transition elements are very good elements which can be doped. Particularly if I say elements having electrons 1 to 10 present in the d orbitals, particularly, that's why it's called d block elements are very useful. The penultimate energy level and in the outermost s orbital, that is 1 to 2, are basically it's called d block elements. Those elements are very useful if you dope these aluminum nitride. You can convert that into a ferromagnetic material, above the room temperature, particularly above the Curie temperature. And this particular thing is the chromium manganese. I will show you the magnetic moments imports, how much it can impart on the aluminum nitride in the next slide. And if you dope scandium or titanium, basically it will increase the anisotropic nature, and it can be used as a piezoelectric material. The reason is the potential stored in the system is much higher compared to the chromium and Mn doped aluminum nitride. And particularly if you dope the aluminum nitride, initially I told it is 210 nanometer is the wavelength. But suppose if you dope with these kind of elements, you can cover the complete UV range, and you can get different kinds of emission from this doped system. And I have listed certain important applications. See, for example, it can be spin valves and high temperature devices. I said why it is high temperature material, because aluminum nitride is a very high insulating material, and but interestingly, high conducting material because of the phonons. This is a, even though it is called the wide band gap, which is 6.2 eV is the band gap. When you dope with some elements, it will come to semiconducting side. But this elements, this particular aluminum nitride compound is a very good heat conducting material. That's why it is used in the semiconductor industry as a heat sink, particularly in the case of any diodes, or if you wanted to make any ICs, this illuminated can become a very good insulator. At the same time, it conducts the heat, it dissipates the heat. So this can be used for high temperature applications also. Initially, I told the piezoelectricity is very important. The piezoelectricity at high temperature, you can use it in particularly in the reactor scenario, which works more than 500 degrees centigrade or close to 600 degrees centigrade. Certain fission or fusion reactors, wherever you want, you can use this as a ultrasonic sensors. Well, okay, you can see this. See the chromium and manganese, they impart very high magnetic moment into the system, and they are having 4 or 5 unpaired electrons. This is the main reason behind that the spin comes into the system. But one important thing we have to study, that the nearest neighbor of this aluminum nitride, whether it is titanium or chromium, or this titanium and chromium makes a cluster. This is what very important when you dope these elements into the system. Well, this is what I said. When you see the lattice constant versus the energy band gap, see here silicon is very far away, around 5.4 is the lattice parameter. And when you see that silicon carbide and the gallium nitride, they are very close. Similarly, aluminum nitride, but band gap is 6.2 eV, and sapphire is also very high. That's of 6. I mean, it's an insulating material. And you know, when you make an alloy, this aluminum with gallium nitride or indium with gallium nitride, you can certainly you can think of a new alloy which can have a different wavelengths. You can engineer the wavelength in the case of LEDs. That's what I wanted to show here. See, this is the A-axis, this is the C-axis. When you see the A-axis, this aluminum nitride and gallium nitride is very close to each other. So the growth of gallium nitride over aluminum nitride substrate is very easy. That's what we have to understand from this system. And this is basically this alpha gallium nitride, alpha aluminum nitride is used in the case of LEDs. Similarly, you can see that aluminum nitride versus gallium nitride in the case of C-axis, but there is a gap exists, not like A-axis, but you can see a variety of alloys are grown, and they are studied in the laboratories all over the world. So with this, let us go to the fundamental subject to cover all the people. I expect that not all from thin film growing persons. So I just wanted to differentiate between each and every different conditions. For example, you know very well PVD and CVD, and interestingly, this PVD is the whole gamut and then of deposition systems, and both PVD and CVD comes under atomistic and molecular deposition. And if you go to particulate deposition, the thickness is very large. If you want to have a thick coating, electroplating, all those things comes under the thick platings, and particularly bulk coatings. These are all bulk coatings. And the surface modification, you modify only the surface. For example, ion implantation and plasma ion implantation, you just bombard, that will go only few nanometers, like up to 100 or at the maximum 200 or something like that. It will go and it will stop there. And if you heat them, the collision cascade around that area will create few nanoparticles, or maybe new phases you can form at the top layer, very top layer. Okay. So if you see that atomistic Sputtering comes under plasma. Plasma means you need to have a positive ion, a negative ion, and a neutral particles all coexist. So you cannot have very high vacuum in the system. But when you wanted to have very high vacuum, then there are certain techniques called electron beam evaporation, vacuum, simple vapor evaporation. Unfortunately, those kind of techniques, the control of deposition is difficult, unlike this sputtering other techniques, but the rate of deposition is very low. And of course, CVD is a very good technique, but the harmful gases comes out of the reaction. So CVD is also used, but nevertheless, PVD is the best technique for growing any material, because the residue also will not be there. But unfortunately, there are two differentiation. If you wanted to have very high vacuum, the rate of deposition is high. And if you have rate of deposition is controlled, but you have to grow in a lesser vacuum, like around 10 power minus 2 to minus 3, or at the close to 10 power minus 4. You cannot cross 10 power minus 4 millibar vacuum. That's what we can understand from the surface engineering of materials. And if you wanted to have thick coatings, electrolytic coatings are there, and anodizing is possible. All those things are existing. Okay, well, basically the terminology what I am going to follow now is, basically I am working on physical vapor deposition technique. In the physical vapor deposition technique, substrate, the surface or the component on which you are going to deposit, it is called substrate. That's what you wanted to improve the property, the base material. In the case of electronics industry, wafer is the one quite frequently used. Target, everybody thinks that target means you go and hit something. But here in this case of sputtering technique, the material which you wanted to evaporate is called target material, that is loaded in the Mantron gun. When you power them, the Mantron gun will sputter the elements by way of momentum transfer. The ions will bombard on the surface, and then that will emit or detach the surface atoms. That atoms will be polymeted, and that will go and deposit on the substrate. Similarly, the source, this is a simple evaporation technique. This source is the material which you want to evaporate. There is a small difference. Target is used in the sputtering technique, and source is used in the physical vapor deposition. I mean, not physical, all are physical vapor deposition only. The vapor deposition or electron beam deposition. And always we say vacuum. The vacuum is, it's a low pressure. And add atom is the atoms evaporated which goes and deposit on the surface. No, that is called add atoms. And the collision cascade means the atoms displacement, means the atom goes and sticks to the surface, and then the next atoms will come and hit the surface of the atom, that can push so that the density of the coating can be improved. And because of the pushing, the atoms moves here and there. That is called collision cascade. The monolayer, fundamentally the thin films can be grown in island growth or the layer growth, or both together. When you cover full surface, that is one full layer forms on that is called one monolayer, one atomic layer. And sticking coefficient is the ratio between the number of absorbent atoms to the impinged atoms. See how much it goes and stick to the surface, but there are more number of atoms goes, but only few atoms will stick to the surface. That is the sticking coefficient. So that means not all evaporated atoms will go and stick to the surface of the substrate. Okay, this is just a collective idea. The thin films can be, there should be an understanding what is a thin film, what is a thick film. This is similar to nanotechnology. When you observe the fundamental property, or maybe the bulk property of the material. For example, if you take a gold, if you go below a few tenths of nanometer, the melting point drastically decreases. Similar to that, if you observe any interesting property compared to the bulk, that is called thin. And roughly you can say that less than 1 micrometers or 2 micrometers, whichever level depends on the compound or element. You can call it a thin film. So they can be used as a reflective or anti-reflective coatings, and particularly decoration. In the case of Titan watches, the rings are coated with titanium nitride. You know, titanium nitride is very hard material. More than 25 GPa is the hardness. It cannot be scratched by any other hard materials like steel or iron or whatever alloys of iron. Cannot scratch that because they are all roughly 4 GPa hardness, much lower compared to titanium nitride. Titanium nitride color is golden color. That means you can replace the gold, but the cost wise they are comparable. That's why it is not cheap compared to gold. And insulation coatings in semiconductor devices, particularly memory disks in the magnetic property, chemicals like diffusion barrier. I just wanted to mention one information here. In the case of fusion reactor, the tritium used as the coolant. Unfortunately, tritium is very expensive, and it cannot be. It has to be in-house. It's breeded, so we cannot waste the tritium. And tritium is nothing but hydrogen. Hydrogen will go into the structural steels. It will the strength of the steel will go down. That means embrittlement will take place. So to avoid that, the coating should prevent the tritium into the structural material. So such diffusion barriers also can be created, and oxidation, corrosion, these are all very important applications. Mechanically, the tribological coatings, the hardness can be increased and wear resistance can be increased, but at the same time, the hardness and wear resistance should not abrade the other counterpart. So the friction coefficient should be minimized. These are all the ways one can think of about the thin films. Well, how to grow a aluminum nitride? I'm going to show a full gamut of aluminum nitride, whichever we have grown in our laboratory, and how to grow aluminum nitride in A-axis orientation. All those things I'm going to discuss now. These are simple magnetron sputtering technique, semi-automatic. It's not completely automatic. You can control the sputtering power, and you can control the pressure inside the system, and then the gas flow, that is whether you want to have argon or argon to nitrogen, that which ratio, and the target to substrate distance, which is very important parameter, and the temperature of the substrate. All these things play a very important role. You can understand from this aluminum nitride, the target to substrate distance is 100 mm, and from that, if I grow, the one particular orientation grows, others are suppressed when the temperature is increased from room temperature 100, 200, and 300. When I change the target to substrate distance suddenly from 100 mm to 180 mm, the one particular growth is possible, that is 100, which I will explain. These are the possibilities. When you change the parameters, you can get wonderful crystalline films. Well, we have started with aluminum nitride films, but initially we have kept everything constant other than the argon to nitrogen ratio. See, argon to nitrogen ratio, if I have 11%, that means argon is higher and nitrogen is very small. In such situation, the film is completely aluminum. Maybe a few nitrogen will be there that I did not show in the X-ray diffraction. This is the X-ray diffraction profile. When you add nitrogen further, around 6.5, it becomes completely amorphous. This is the very important film. Usually ion implantation techniques, this is used. That's why we are taking up this challenge. And when you increase the argon to nitrogen ratio, it has become aluminum nitride. That is, argon to nitrogen is 4%, and you can get aluminum nitride completely. But we are not interested in this, but we are interested in this amorphous material. We just annealed at two different conditions. Like one is high vacuum and another one is at nitrogen atmosphere, but temperatures are 800 degrees centigrade. You can see that high vacuum annealing, high vacuum means 10 to the minus 6 millibar, not more than that. A small alumina hump has been seen, but it's not a real peak unless otherwise we go and do the XPS analysis. But how we have arrived at 800 degrees centigrade can be seen from this. Nitrogen annealed and high vacuum annealed separately. We have taken up the film, amorphous film. We have annealed at different temperatures. You can see up to 500 degrees centigrade, there is no change in the system. You know, melting point of aluminated is more than 2000 degrees centigrade. So there will not be any change in the system. But the moment you touch 600 and if you go to 700, the peak forms. Now you look at this, a very clear peaks formed in the case of 800 degrees centigrade annealing. That's what we did, a systematic annealing in the case of amorphous aluminum nitride. That is around, if you see that the argon to nitrogen is 6.5. And this has been published in Journal of Physics, the Applied Physics. One can refer that. Well, when you test that, we wanted to know whether the after annealing, whether oxide phase exists or not. So what we did, we just tested by XPS. XPS will give you the bonding between the information belongs to the two elements, that is aluminum to oxygen, aluminum to nitrogen. This information you can get it. But when you see the broad spectrum, that wide, all the elements present, but you cannot understand very clearly. But when you see the aluminum and the nitrogen, particularly oxygen, the oxygen peak, you know, in the case of as deposition, yes, of course, there is a small amount, but when you anneal it, you know, at nitrogen atmosphere, this alumina formation is suppressed. That's what these peaks are when it is shifting towards the left, particularly in the nitrogen case, and in the case of oxygen also. So this is what very important one can understand. So high vacuum annealed, that is particularly 6.5 argon to nitrogen ratio when you take into the further studies. Because this is very useful when you go for ion implantation technique. And as you know, we are basically from mechanical engineering group people. We wanted to test the hardness. The amorphous one, as the first study is amorphous one, has shown 19, close to 18 GPa hardness, but these are all 16 GPa hardness only we are seen with the depth. The main reason behind them, the amorphous nature material are, you know, when you reduce the grain size, the hardness increases, but when you anneal them, the grain size increases, the hardness comes down, which I will explain you in the little later stage. That's the reason. Here we have seen the hardness, but almost both are looking similar. And everybody wants to know how to grow the aluminum nitride. In particular, we have varied the deposition pressure and target to substrate distance, all those things. But just here, for our understanding, we kept it at one particular pressure, 5.6. And if you change the target to substrate distance, you will see different kinds of growth. Particularly if you go beyond this point, particularly this line, all are amorphous illuminated only. You can get wherever you would deposit. Either you go to higher pressure, sorry, I mean this range, and higher target to substrate distance. That higher target to substrate distance, the distance when it increases, the number of atoms goes and sticks to the surface is very less, and you are allowing it to, if the substrate temperature is not sufficient enough to grow as crystalline, it will become amorphous. And if it is close by, the structure will become crystalline, because the further incoming atoms that will bombard on the surface, that will transfer some energy to the already existing atoms, these add atoms. Because of that energy, the crystalline structure illuminated forms. That's what, if you reduce from 12 to 10, this zone, you can see 100 orientation, which is very, very important. But practically, no one has shown a precise one, which in the future course I will show you how we have grown up. And if you grow a film in the region 2, there is mixed orientation. Always this you can get. 100 and 002 both will coexist normally. If you go below the 6 centimeter the distance, then you will get a 002 orientation, which people already deposited and demonstrated very well. Well, what we have done with the we have kept all other conditions constant, as I told, that deposition pressure and target subsidence. Now we have varied the temperature alone, room temperature to 600 degrees centigrade. You can see that the growth of crystals up to 400 degrees centigrade. After that, it becomes 18 nanometers. You will get a question how and why. The reason is the resputtering takes place at around 600 degrees centigrade, which is not possible in the case up to 400 degrees centigrade. That's what a main reason. And when you grow with different substrate temperatures, you can understand at around 400 degrees centigrade, only one peak is observed around 100, but remaining peaks are almost nil. That's what very important. And we did analysis of rocking curve. The rocking curve basically talks about whether the material is crystalline or single crystal or not. That we can find out from the rocking curve. Just a minute. When you take this particular 400 degree centigrade grown film, if you study by rocking curve, that means you are what you are doing, you fix the detector at around 33 degrees, but just you tilt the sample so that you will get a profile. This width of this rocking curve talks about the single crystal size. Basically, if it is very small, that is, if the peak is one sharp line, that means it's a very large crystal. But if the width is reducing, I mean, if the width is increasing, that means they are polycrystalline. From that only we normally calculate the from the Scherrer formula, we calculate the size of the grains. Crystallite size we always calculate. Well, just I wanted to compare the transmission electron microscopy profile of 35 degrees, this room temperature, close to room temperature grown, and this 400 degrees centigrade. You can see almost all orientations exist. And in this case, it's a one particular orientation. You can see that difference you can understand from this. If it is amorphous, it's a diffused ring can be seen. A polycrystalline, this is selected area diffraction profile. The rings, perfect rings, that means all the orientations are randomly oriented. That means polycrystalline. When you grow a single crystal, perfect single crystal, that means you will see only spots at definite places. But in our case, in this case, you can see it looks like a polycrystalline. But in this case, you can see some particular orientation exists. That means this has both the orientation, like 100 and some other orientation also coexist. That's what we can understand from this X-ray. There are two peaks coexist. So from this we can understand that the crystal grown at 400 degrees centigrade oriented in particular direction. Interestingly, they are all slanted in, from the surface. When you grow a film with a gun tilted to 45 degrees centigrade, 45 degrees, your growth will also facing that direction. That's what our guns are focused to. 3 guns are there. All the 3 guns are focusing to one particular direction. Maybe, I don't know whether I have, just a minute, I'll just, any image I have. Sorry to going back, and 1 minute, I just, yeah, okay. Here one gun and here another gun, just opposite side one gun is there. So that means all the 3 guns are focusing to the substrate. That means 45 degree angle is there. That's what the TEM also shows, that the growth is not a perpendicular one. Rather, it is slanting. In all the cases, it's slanting. That is the main reason. And if you grow the films at different substrate temperatures, they will impart stress in the system. When we tested the residual stress using chi-square mean sine square psi technique, if you tilt the sample in one particular direction of higher 2 theta peaks, for example, in our case, we always take this particular orientation or somewhere this particular orientation. If you do the sine square psi analysis, the low temperature one exhibited tensile stress. When you reduce when you increase the temperature, substrate temperature, the stress transforms compressive, tensile to compressive. When you have compressive residual stress, the hardness increases. And interestingly, when we calculated the thermal stress with this equation, you can see all are compressive stress. That means the thermal stress plays a very vital role in the case of growth of illuminated with residual stress in the system. And when you test them by nanomechanical testing, the hardness increases around 200 degrees centigrade. After that, it decreases. The circled one is the hardness, and this is the modulus. Hardness is roughly goes to 19 GPa, and it decreases. So possibly the reason is, one is the grain size. You can see that grain size versus the hardness I have plotted here. Hall pitch is a very famous relationship. When you decrease the grain size, the strength or hardness of the material changes. That means if you decrease it, the hardness increases. Unfortunately, that cannot go upon endlessly. At a particular 1 minute. At a particular point, the transition will occur. So this, or maybe somewhere here, this will reduce the hardness will reduce. That means, if you go below and below, the dislocation density or dislocations cannot be discussed in an amorphous material because there is no definite boundary, grain boundary, and below which the material shows less hardness compared to the crystalline or pure grain materials. Well, we have used spectroscopic ellipsometry. I just tell you briefly, which is not my field but my collaborator field. The polarization change is represented in the form of amplitude and phase difference, whether it's a perpendicular component or a parallel component from the reflected light. This, if you analyze, you can find out the refractive index of the material, and you can find out the roughness of the surface, and you can find out the thickness of the film, because each and every layer, for example, if the light falls on this and then reflects, each and every layer can be studied, and the layer thickness can be found out. Sometimes even if you have a proper modeling, like we have used Furughi-Bloomer, like that, if you have a special model, you can find out the composition also from the system. That's what, for example, if you have how much doping is there, you can calculate from the, indirectly you can get the details from this ellipsometry. It's a very versatile technique which is used in the semiconductor industry. See what we have used. This is the model layers. This is the silicon substrate we have used 100, and on the top we have included aluminum plus illuminated. It's a very thin layer, and illuminated is our layer. And on the top we have said that okay, roughness is there and air. With this model, if you plot, you will get two ellipsometric parameters, IS and IC. From this, we can calculate the refractive index of the material. That's what we did. And see different substrate temperatures. We have studied at parallel and perpendicular directions. This N is the refractive index. This is the counterpart, the extinction coefficient, basically. When you test them and see that with the temperature, particularly the N component is increasing and decreasing. K component is not that much affected by this change of temperature. When you go to 400 degrees centigrade, probably because of the orientation, the N component is higher. When you see that reported A-axis oriented ALN film exhibited a 2.7 the refractive index, but in our case, we have found around 2.5. Particularly the range of energy is around 6 eV. That is the one which I think 546 nanometer is the one normally people will compare for the refractive index is concerned. Well, we have calculated the band gap also. With temperature, you can engineer the band gap. It is simple aluminum nitride. And when you compare them, the birefringence from this technique, C-axis and A-axis, you can get a close by result, but there is a change in the case of A-axis oriented aluminum nitride, which I will discuss further. Okay, this is the what I said, that cubic aluminum nitride. There is a slight deviation, but I just wanted to show you how the cubic aluminum nitride can be grown. We have grown one more offshoot of aluminum nitride. If you add titanium with higher percentages, you can see titanium nitride peaks, and finally it goes to amorphous when you incorporate the aluminum into the system. This is basically titanium nitride. What happens around 64%, it becomes amorphous, and then complete amorphous is seen in the case of 0.81. So we wanted to know what happens when you anneal them. So when you when you anneal them, this particular 81% aluminum, you can see two peaks formed. That is, one is for the hexagonal aluminum nitride and titanium nitride. And particularly when you anneal this 64%, only this peak splits into two. There is cubic aluminum nitride and cubic TiN. You can ask me a question, how this is a cubic aluminum nitride? I will tell you how. When you increase the aluminum percentage, the grain size decreases. You have seen from that it's amorphous when you go to 81%. But when you see the hardness of the material, if you see that the same penetration depth, but the load increases. That means the hardness increases. Indirectly, we can understand. Particularly 64%, you just see that because of this formation of new compound, this is as deposited condition. When you anneal them, the hardness increased to 39 GPa. So from the X-ray, we found out this is cubic aluminum nitride. Because of this, the hardness jumps from 35 to 39 GPa. So this is the reason. And 64% aluminum nitride, the nano indentation profile looks almost it's a sinking type of this thing. But when you this thing for a 81% aluminum doped system, it's a kind of sinking as well as the pile up both exist. So that means the annealing in the 61% aluminum doped system, you can get aluminum nitride in the cubic form, and the width also very large. That means this is nanometric size. Probably it be less than 6 or 7 nanometers. That's what, from this we can understand cubic aluminum nitride exists. Well, this is the highlight of our this talk today. For example, when I grow the film from room temperature to different temperatures, but this is 100 millimeter distance from the 100 millimeter distance from the target to substrate. I have changed the temperature. You have seen all are belongs to aluminum nitride peaks. Both coexist 002 as well as 100. It's a polycrystalline system. But interestingly, when you change the target to substrate distance to 140, this 110 peak also decreases, also the 002 and 101, the intensity decreases. But when I further increase the target to substrate distance, the around 180 millimeter, you know, interestingly, only one peak. And please mind here, all these profiles are from grazing incident XRD. This one is powder XRD. The difference is, in the case of oriented film, the GA XRD may or can miss the peaks because of the orientation. It can miss that. But in the case of powder XRD, both arms are moving, that incident angle and the detector side. Because of that, you can capture that one particular orientation very well. The intensity is very small. That's why you see silicon peak is very high, which is missing here. You can completely isolate silicon substrate peak when you keep the incident angle less than 0.5 or 0.5. But in the case of powder XRD, you cannot miss it. The X-ray will penetrate into the film and it goes to the substrate. That's what happens. Interestingly, this is the rocking curve, as I initially told. The thickness of the the thickness of the crystal comes from this number. How much small if you get the crystal is very large. That is what it shows. The width is 0.01458 is the degrees. That much small. That is in the omega angle. Initially, I told how you will measure the omega, this rocking curve. So from this particular idea, we got the illuminated can be grown in axis oriented fashion. Interestingly, this is layered and the island growth technique. That's why you can see small dot kind of things. This is the island, and the covered layer is covered. And this is atomic force microscopy. This is a secondary electron microscopy, the same image. From this, we can understand. This published in APL in the year 2012. Well, we have studied the ellipsometry just to find out the refractive index. See, with different wavelengths, refractive index can be tested, as well as the extinction coefficient that decreases with the wavelength of the light. And around 546 nanometer wavelength light, we got a 1.93 is the refractive index of the materials roughly. So this is visible range I am talking about. When we tested the hardness with the depth, because the thickness of the coating is very small, so when we had tested that, the hardness roughly stopped at around 19 GPa. Amorphous illuminated shown 18 GPa, and a crystalline one decreased because different annealing temperatures. And in the case of axis oriented illuminated, it's 19. So you can understand that illuminated can show anywhere between 15 to 20 GPa hardness. I wanted to show how the nano-indentation is tested. We measured the hardness. See, this material you want to test. This is the indenter. Usually the indenter will touch the surface first, see that surface, and this is the Berkovich tip with a 35 degrees as a subtended angle. From this, it's a three-side pyramid that will go and touch the surface. The load will be increased, and then it kept constant, and it's unloaded. In this process, we are going to measure hardness and modulus. You may ask a question, basically a conventional hardness technique, it will create a plastic deformation. How you can get it? Interestingly, in the unloading part, the system will retrieve the elastic energy. From that, the initial part of the unloading curve, we can get the modulus also from the indentation. And interestingly, you can see, you can map the area, and the scale is roughly, see, maybe the indenter dimension is 30 nanometer is the tip diameter, and probably these are all anywhere between 1 micrometer. So many indents you can do on a 100 mm by 100 mm, so 100 micrometer by 100 micrometer area, and you can completely map the hardness and modulus from this technique. Well, I just wanted to summarize this aluminum nitride. We have tested we have grown the aluminum nitride with a different substrate temperature, particularly 400 degrees centigrade shown A-axis preferential orientation, and hardness exhibited 19 GPa, and basically 400 degrees centigrade when you grow, it is elastic in nature. That also we have found out. And this anisotropic optical properties also we have found out, and around 596 nanometers, so 1.93 is the refractive index. Hereafter, I just jump quickly for the how to dope with other elements like, for example, titanium and chromium, and what all the properties we found out, and how the chromium doped with the aluminum nitride goes and sits nearby the titanium atoms, or it replaces the aluminum atom. Similarly, the chromium, whether it replaces the aluminum atom or not, all those things we'll see quickly with the help of X-ray absorption spectroscopy. The similar conditions we have followed, but in this case we have reduced the target to substrate distance to get a uniform film. But so that's why we have kept at 7 centimeter instead of 14 or something like that in the previous cases. And quickly, if you see that the grain size, there is no big change when you change the power of the deposition. Almost all are same. What happens when you increase the atomic percentage of titanium? Basically, just now I have shown that when you increase the titanium, the hardness should increase. But that is a very large level of titanium. That means aluminum is very small quantity, around roughly, if you see that 18 or 20 atomic percentages. But in this case, aluminum nitride is predominant. So titanium is very small quantity. So hardness comes mainly because of the microstructure, and we wanted to see how much this titanium replaces the aluminum, and with the help of okay. We just wanted to see whether oxygen is there in the system or not. We did XPS. You can understand from this data points and this profile, the maximum, that predominant one is 74.2. That means it's aluminum nitride is there. This aluminum oxygen content is very, very, very less. This shoulder only shows that maybe a possibility, because sputtering takes place in around 10 power minus 3 millibar vacuum. And in the case of nitrogen also, you can see that predominantly it is aluminum nitride, not the carbon is not there, because usually when you go to the XPS, your fingerprints will also incorporate carbon. So that also not possible in our case. So from this, we understood that aluminum nitride exists, but for titanium 2p32 peaks also, we have seen when you increase the titanium content, but this is very, very small. That we can understood from the X-ray absorption spectroscopy, how much this titanium goes and sits nearby the aluminum atom or replaces. Well, this is a very interesting technique. The X-rays will go close to the atom, and from the reflection, you can find out whether the titanium replaces aluminum or titanium sits on the aluminum sides. All those details we can find out. Particularly, what we have understood from this pre-edge peaks, the titanium is sits in the place of aluminum. You cannot get, we did not get pure titanium or titanium cluster, or TiO2 also did not form, and either TiN or these two are very close by. So this titanium atom replaces the aluminum, and there is a slight distorted structure tetrahedron formed in the system. So from this, what we understood that the bond length and the number of atoms close by are very we can find out from the X-ray absorption spectroscopy. That's what I wanted to show here. Yeah, because hardness is my study is my specialization in our group. So we always go and test that. Here, what we did, usually you do indentation at one particular depth, but we did a continuous multi-cycle indentation with the different depths in one single indentation. In that process, you can get continuous stiffness measurement also. So when you do that for all these 4 different kinds of materials, I have compared with pure silicon. This is the silicon hardness. Of course, definitely the hardness increased, but after a level, it decreases and stabilizes around 16, 17 GPa. So this is basically called indentation size effect. So that's why the hardness goes up suddenly and it comes down and it stabilizes. Suppose if you plot the titanium percentage versus the hardness at one particular depth, for example, either 200 or 100 nanometer depth, the hardness increases with the addition of titanium. That anybody can see that very clearly. That's what I have mentioned here. The bond length decreases with the increase of titanium concentration. From this, we can understand. So the summary is the titanium replaces the aluminum atom, and because of that, there is a tensile stress forms. That also can be understood from the, you can see that shift in the peak. When the peak shifts towards left-hand side, the 2 theta, that means D increases. That means a tensile strain in the system. That's what we can understand from the X-ray. All those things we have to compare, then we can come to a conclusion. And the bond length moderately decreases with titanium. And the hardness, if you see, basically it's almost stabilized, but the at the surface means maybe due to the indentation size effect, the hardness is very high, but otherwise they are all less than 19 GPa hardness. Till how much time we have? Okay.
Another 15 minutes.
Okay, fine. So with this, let us conclude. When you add chromium, this is what famously reported element in aluminum nitride. They have seen very high magnetic moment in the system, so that we wanted to test this also. We just grown the film with the different concentrations of chromium, 0, 2, 4, 6 atomic percentages. And, I don't want to go deep like what kind of power we have modified, changed, but the pressure was changing because of this change in the power, but always in 10 power minus 3 millibar range. And the peak position did not change much, but the intensity increases. That means grain growth is more. When you see the grain size, this is 0 means pure aluminum nitride. When you add chromium, the grain size increases. That one can understand from the width decrease and the intensity increases. That from this we can understand very clearly. And this is a plot for basically to understand the residual stress of the system. When you increase the percentage of chromium, how the growth of thin film with stress, but here it's a 0 atomic percentage and 6 atomic percentage, but there is no big difference in the kind of slope. So it's almost same. Well, again, we did the XPS study. Here also, the oxygen content is very, very small compared to the aluminum nitride formation. And similarly, the carbon is very less. From that, we can understand from the nitrogen profiles. And the chromium nitride, of course, formed in the case of, I just missed because 0, there is pure aluminum nitride I have shown in the previous slides. So just I am showing only the addition of chromium. You can find out these are all almost close to 575. That means chromium nitride also exists in the system. Again, we did the X-ray absorption spectroscopy. Interesting thing again here, oxygen did not form. This pre-edge is the one which will give you whether this compound, I mean, nearest neighbor is chromium or chromium oxygen or chromium chromium. From this profile, from this peak, we understood that it's a chromium nitrogen only formed, not the other like a chromium oxide or chromia or pure chromium metals did not form. And chromium replaces the aluminum atom, like similar to the titanium case. That's what we have observed. And these are all just fitting from the X-ray absorption spectroscopy. Well, what we did, again, the continuous stiffness measurement we did, but in this case also increase sudden initial lower surface, but when you go beyond 100 nanometers, the hardness stabilizes, and this modulus this hardness. If I plot at one particular depth, like 40 nanometer depth, how the hardness varies, if you see, you know, this circled one is hardness. It increases up to 2% of chromium. After that, there is no big difference, but there is a slight deviation from the hardness. That means hardness can be engineered by adding titanium or adding aluminum to the titanium or chromium into the aluminated system. Again, if you see the indentation area, the 6% and 0% pure aluminated, this is addition of chromium. That means the 6% addition of chromium, the hardness increases compared to that. That's what it shows. From here, it goes up. The error bar shows that the deviation is very, very small. Well, in this case also, just I wanted to conclude that we have grown a different chromium percentage aluminum nitride system, and the X-ray absorption spectroscopy shows that this is also a distorted tetragon structure, but there is a small difference in the case of the refractive index, but which I did not show here, compared to titanium and chromium. Chromium is better than the titanium dope system. That's what we have seen. And of course, hardness, this is only on the top surface, but varies between 17.5 to 23 GPa by adding chromium to the system. One last slide. From this, you can understand a multi-layer can also show the hardness that varies from exactly it will show Hall pitch and reverse Hall pitch. This x-axis is the individual layer thickness. This is the transmission electron microscopy. This is SIMS, secondary ion mass spectroscopy. If you change the individual layer thickness, that's what I have shown here. If it is single layer is 30 nanometer, the hardness is around 29 GPa. And if you reduce it 23, it goes 32, and it goes 34 when it is 15. That means the bilayer is 30 nanometers. That's what I wanted to show here. The layer thickness you can see from this transmission, cross-sectional transmission electron microscopy. And from this multi-layer, you can understand that the both can be possible, that individual layer thickness mimics the Hall pitch relationship. If the thickness reduces, the hardness increases. This is the critical size of the grain or critical size of individual layer thickness, below which the hardness decreases. So from this we can understand the Hall pitch and reverse Hall pitch relationship, the pure for understanding of multi-layers. So our discussion is like this. The terminology used for thin films and how to synthesize aluminated films, and titanium doped and chromium doped, finally multi-layers. And I have shown a slide how the nanomechanical characterization is measured, and reverse Hall pitch relationship also I have shown. These are all the things we have seen, understood from our discussion today. Sorry, he is Dr. Padmalochan Panda, and these are all two students already completed. Dr. Kiran helped me to do the hardness measurement from IISc. He is right now in SRM University. There, Dr. Tripurasundari is the one did ellipsometry. Dr. Dash is our boss, and Baldevraj was previous director who helped us to do these kind of experiments in our group. So just want to thank them. Thank you so much. Please visit IGCAR, and we are close to Mahabalipuram. It's a beautiful place. During just before rainy season, you can visit and enjoy the place. I'm sorry now this time is COVID and it's difficult, but next year you can very well visit our IGCAR also. Thank you so much. If you have any question, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you, sir. Actually, it's it's a lot of information about aluminum nitrate thin film, and actually various question technique, and how by doping you can do a lot of application in the wide bandgap semiconductor application. So, for example, because of this non-centrosymmetry, you can go for piezoelectric nanogenerator, and also ultrasonic actually sensor. Those things are hints for us, and you focused all the hardness experiment. So we have some hint also to do something in the sensor or energy harvesting field. So I think I hope audience enjoyed. Now we can hear it from audience. So, is there any queries? So you can.
Audience, if you have any questions, please unmute your mic and ask.
Or if they have something, they can type it also.
Yeah,
somebody can moderate.
Type in the chat box. Sir, I have one question.
Yeah, please.
How the magnetic properties of aluminum nitrate varies when you dope chromium and
which I left it for the audience to ask the question. See, when you add particularly chromium, when you increase the chromium, of course, the d block element can impart some free electrons. That electrons induce magnetic moments. If you increase more amount of chromium into the system, the magnetic moment increases, the magnetic property goes up, but that also cannot go beyond a particular percentage. That it can, if you go beyond 6 or 8%, again it will come down, which it's on. We are testing now, so I don't have a clear data to present. The problem is if you don't anneal the system, already we have done XAS with before annealing or after annealing. Without annealing, if you test that in squid system, the amount of magnetic moment measured is not uniform and it is not very clear. So now we are doing the studies after annealing. So definitely from the literature, what we have understood that with the addition of chromium, the magnetic moment should increase. That's what one can understand from this. Yeah.
So they are all room temperature ferromagnet.
Yes. That is very important. When you add chromium, it goes above Curie temperature. That is very important, Otherwise, there is no meaning in doping elements. Yes, you are right.
Actually, I have one. Actually, as you said, our colleague, Dr. Kiran Mangalampalli is with us.
Yes.
So he do all this nano indentation. So so because of that, we also kind of familiar with this field.
Okay.
But actually, to measure the hardness, you are doing indentation.
Yeah.
So before all the characterization, you are telling it's amorphous and actually single crystalline, all those things. So after indentation, there will be phase transformation happen, in the coating. So that is he's working on. So that's why I'm asking. So just your hard coating, and after that you're testing hardness. And what happened after the indentation? So if any, is there any change in the case?
Yeah, one particular case is in the case of silicon. Very well explained. When you indent silicon, there are 2 or 3 polymorphs. I think the 2 or 3 different crystal structures exist in the case of silicon. From one to another structure it goes. Probably, if you wanted to see, in the case of nano indentation, there is a loading curve. There is an unloading profile. In the loading profile, if there is any change in the indentation line, That means if suddenly drops, that means the penetration depth increases for a same load. That may be due to several things like porosity or anything you can say. But when you unload, in the unloading profile, if you see anything, suddenly a change in the penetration depth for the same load, such change in the profiles basically due to the structural change. For example, if you have a hexagonal to crystal, hexagonal to cubic system change, the C by A remains constant. The C suddenly decreases to same level of A. That means there is a volume change. So if the volume changes, definitely the indenter will experience that change in the volume. That's why they're changing the penetration depth. You know, the penetration depth, you cannot visualize that just like that because it's in the nanometer, few nanometers, maybe 4 or 5 nanometers, or it depends on the material. So such change definitely can. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Such changes basically comes from very few materials, not for all the materials.
All the materials. Okay.
Hello.
So,
Yes, sir. Yes,
there
sir.
is an internet lag. Okay. So even in illuminated, we have seen there is a small such thing, but it is not due to the change in the the crystallographic structure, but maybe due to some other reasons. Like for example, already I told you, the material can stick to the indenter. So many reasons behind that. But if you go to a if you go and test in a clean indenter and a clean system like silicon, when you unload it, you can see the change in the structure.
Okay.
But in the hard materials, very rarely it is possible. Yeah, because you cannot expect like that.
Okay.
So, sir, there is one question from chat box from Srinivasan Tamba.
Okay.
Is there any practical applications exist for amorphous aluminum nitrate?
Can I drop this so that, yeah. If I stop sharing the screen, maybe I can also see that.
Yeah.
Tell me. Yeah. What is the question? Show different orientations of ALN and amorphous film. Just out of curiosity, if any practical applications exist on amorphous films. Yes, exactly. See, when you go for ion implantation, for example, you have aluminum film deposited on the in electronics industry for growing some diodes or something like that. You wanted to create illuminated only one particular zone. Then you bombard with the nitrogen. You cannot get a crystalline aluminum nitrate. So what you have to do, it will be an amorphous aluminum nitrate at that zone. When you heat treat that whole system, only that location you will get aluminum nitrate. So these kind of things are very useful for the electronics industry. You are not going to grow a continuous film, continuous aluminum nitrate, but in some locations you wanted to have aluminum nitrate, which can be a very good insulator, and as I already told, it can be a very good heat sink. So that is the reason such amorphous films are also very important. You have to study. That's why we have selected the amorphous film and we have gone through the. Otherwise, there is no interest in the amorphous films. Yes. Then all the okay. Next question is, can you please elaborate on the discrepancy observed between the measured residual stresses, calculated residual stresses using analytical expression? Oh, actually, there is no discrepancy. This residual stress due to the temperature, your residual stress of the whole system changes because you have grown at different substrate temperatures, no? So when you grow at different substrate temperatures, the stress due to the temperature also comes into picture. Particularly the grain grows and then the stress relieved, all those things come into picture, and the orientation depends on your substrate, the silicon lattice parameter. So many effects comes into the picture. So because of that, the residual stress changes, but it's not calculated is from the temperature. no issues
Thermal
with that.
conductivity.
Yeah. Then what will be the thermal conductivity of ALM? You know, I said already thermal conductivity is very high. You are asking with the addition of chromium and titanium or pure aluminum nitride. I already told, you know, it's because of the phonon activity. The thermal conductivity of aluminum nitride is very high, very high. That's why if you go to a foundry of any semiconductor industry, they will start to grow aluminum nitride as a substrate material, or precisely if I say, just a minute, whether I have that film or not, I'll show. Yes. Just I will share one. Where is it? Sharing. How to share that? Share the screen. Yes. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, just see that. See here, aluminum nitride is grown. This is a CCD packaging. Different materials are there, like molybdenum frame and Invar frame. One particular layer is aluminum nitride. This is because that it will act as a heat sink. So that is the reason the aluminum nitride is a very important material, not only as an insulator, but also as a thermal conducting layer. Yes.
Sir, aluminum nitride has very good thermal conductivity, no doubt. But my research area is on heat sinks and composite materials. So I have seen that aluminum nitride forms agglomerates basically, and it is not moisture resistant. So how to deal with that actually?
See, aluminum nitride is not nitrate; it's aluminum nitride. Okay.
Yes, sir. Nitride only. Aluminum nitride.
So aluminum nitride is a ceramic material. It's a ceramic compound. Yes. It is not hygroscopic. It is not hygroscopic to absorb moisture, and particularly as I told you, the melting point of this aluminum nitride is more than 2000 degrees centigrade.
Yes, sir.
So certainly it cannot absorb
around 2973 degrees.
So it cannot absorb moisture. But you know, your question is agglomeration. Agglomeration comes because of the processing method. Suppose you go for this plasma technique, you will deposit layer by layer. So certainly you will not get agglomeration. If you go for PLD, pulsed laser deposition technique, of course you will get particulates, but the particulates also micrometers, less than 1 or 2 micrometers. Not
because compared to other ceramic materials, I have seen that means comparison.
Which technique you have grown, madam?
Sir?
Which technique you have grown the aluminum nitride?
Sir, for what? For doping or
no,
for...
you said the agglomeration comes. Agglomeration, which technique you are talking about?
So I am talking about compression molding system. The molding system.
That means you make a powder and compress it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. It's powder metallurgy technique.
Yes.
So powder metallurgy, it's a different ball game. Of course, when you go for powder metallurgy, agglomeration due to the surface charges, yes, possible. But in the case of pure deposition technique, I don't think you will, I mean, particularly sputtering or physical vapor deposition, that is, you have thermal evaporation or electron beam evaporation, agglomeration can be controlled. But if you have any problem in agglomeration, in the case of powder metallurgy, you have to reduce the size further and you have to remove the surface charges by either by coating with some kind of silanes or something like that, so that it will remove the surface charge. And then when you compress it and when you heat them, these surface coatings will be evaporated.
Sir, it does not depend on the shape. Does it depend on the shape of the particles?
I do not understand your question very well. How
that if we go down the means in micrometers and nanometers we are dealing with the nanoparticles, the shape, it depends on the shape, or we can use any kind of irregular shape. That's what I am asking.
You are asking?
No, sir, not about powder metallurgy. For any case, like in nanotechnology, particularly, the shape matters or it does not matter?
I don't know how to answer this question, but of course, if you are trying to make a bulk material out of, for example, if it is not a sphere, if it is a different kind of acicular type of shape, your density may come down because the porosity will be there. You have to apply a very large load, large pressure to compress them, and then you have to go for sintering. So the density may be different.
Yes, sir. So it depends particularly on the application area we are dealing with.
Application and the processing area, which technique you are using. So that way it will change.
Okay, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so if there is no other question.
Actually, another question, can we use this with MOSFET for heat dissipation?
Yeah, sorry. What is it?
The same person asked, can we use this with MOSFET for heat dissipation?
Can we use this as a... Yeah, any semiconductor industry, just not I showed CCD camera, you might have seen that. You can deposit on this, and this can be a very good heat sink. No, it's I don't remember the number exactly. The value.
Commercialized. No?
Yeah, it's very well commercialized, and this is used as a heat sink. And you can coat as thin film. No need to go for a bulk materials. Thin film can be act as a heat sink, and it can be. You can apply as a paste also on the surface.
Miniaturization.
Yeah. So all those things are all possible.
Yes. So thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful talk.
Thank you.
And
thank you so much.
It was very interactive.
Yeah.
So
I thank the SRM University and Dr. Navneethan and Dr. Bharati and Dr. Yuvraj. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
With me.
Dr. Yuvraj, thank you so much for you also for sharing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
so
sir.
much.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Okay.